Welcome all. Welcome Stephen Chalke in conversation with Robin Brodhurst. Welcome both of them. I'll leave it to Stephen to welcome one of our Zoomers today, who was a former England Test cricketer, who's part of this story we're going to hear about this afternoon. We're going back to the days of the Imperial Cricket Conference, to 8-ball overs, throwing, dragging. In Australia, I think there were 6-day tests of five hours each. And we're going back in the company of Stephen and Robin. Harry Altham, the Altham-Bradman Letters, that's the book which we're talking about today. Stephen has been, I think, advising Robin on the production of this book. And Harry Altham was, of course, cricketer, schoolmaster, writer of a history of cricket, an administrative bigwig, particularly in the 1950s at Lords. He was also one of the presidents of the Cricket Society in 1960 to 61. He's one of an illustrious small band of people who have held both offices of President of MCC and President of the Cricket Society. So welcome everyone, and I'll hand over to Stephen Chalke. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Nick. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Well, welcome everybody, and special welcome to Robin Brodhurst, who has put together this book, The Altham-Bradman Letters, Harry Altham being his grandfather. And also very special welcome to one of my favourite people in cricket, Bob Barber, who's with us today from Switzerland, who's written the foreword to this excellent book. So I'm going to draw both Robin and Bob into the discussion. And I think there are probably 3 areas we want to talk about. If we talk about Harry Altham, first of all, the man, you've written a lovely memoir about him at the start of this book. Then I think we go into the historical context of these letters between Harry Altham in his year as MCC president and Don Bradman in Australia, and some of the issues that they're wrestling with during this time. And there are several things going wrong in Test cricket, and most notably there's the issue of throwing and dragging, also slow play, also batsmen using their pads instead of their bat. And it's a very interesting period in cricket. And we can open up some of the issues and perhaps have a wider discussion at some point about the whole historical problem of bowling actions and how you deal with them. And I know Bob's got views on this, which will be well worth hearing. So that's the agenda for the afternoon. So first of all, Robin, Harry Altham, I look at my list of chairman of cricket selectors and I see all these great names of cricket. And in the middle, I see this chap, H.S. Altham, never played cricket for England, played a relatively small amount of county cricket on either side of the First World War for Surrey and Hampshire, and went into school teaching. Yet in 1954, he's the chairman of selectors and selects the tour party to go to Australia with Hutton as captain. And how does this come about that he finishes up in that position?
The answer to that is I have no idea, which I wish I did. He was, I think, almost the sort of eminence grise that Gubby Allen later became at Lords. He was the treasurer of the MCC, and therefore the if you like, the long-term continuity along with the secretary. He'd been on the committee since 1940, and as such was at Lords pretty regularly and knew all the people involved. Why he was asked to be chairman in 54, I have no idea. Who knows? It's a simple answer. He agreed to do it purely for the 1 year. And he said, I will only do it for, I know that, only for 1 year. And he was meticulous in going, obviously, to the test matches and going and watching. It was a desperately wet summer. I think 7 complete days were rained out in 4 test matches, which must be unprecedented. I can't think of another wetter season. And they experimented all summer. I think something like 15, 16 players played throughout this, and only 5 played in all 4 test matches. So they really did experiment. Len Hutton was injured for 2 matches. So David Shepherd came in and captained for 2 matches. And as you can imagine, those who were determined there should be an amateur captain had a field day with that and said, oh, it must be Shepherd to captain the side. Harry was determined, I know, that Len Hutton should, he was absolutely convinced that Len Hutton was the right man to captain the tour. He had, after all, won the Ashes back in '53, had drawn a series in the West Indies against a very strong West Indies side, and had done so principally on the back of his own batting in the West Indies. So he was quite determined that that was the case. So why he was chosen, why he was asked to be chairman, I have no idea, but it was an interesting summer.
And you've got a lovely story in the book about your father picking him up from the station at Winchester on his way home from the selection meeting.
That's right. Dad picked him up from the station in his car, and as they came down the hill, any of you who know Winchester, you come down the hill from the station, the traffic lights at the bottom of the hill. And as they stopped, Harry leant over to him and said, I thought you might like to look at this, particularly the 2 names at the bottom. And the 2 names at the bottom were F.H. Tyson and M.C. Cowdery. I'd like to think that Dad stole the car in surprise, but I don't think so. But very nice, it's a nice story, and that became kind of family law, etc.
And neither were established cricketers at all at that stage.
Very much not. Tyson had played in the Oval Test match, and famous.
But that is after the selection of the team, I think.
Yes, it was. I think I'm right, Stephen. He had bowled at Lord's against Middlesex, and had laid out Bill Edrich,
yep.
which was no mean feat. Edrich, of course, came back later the same day, and I gather was bounced first ball and went to hook it. I gather whether he's, who knows, it doesn't matter whether he did or didn't. But yes, and Cowdery had played a bit for Kent and had finished at Oxford, I think, by '54, I think, and chosen on promise, very much so. Of course, the youngest schoolboy, I think, to play at Lord's for Tunbridge at age 13 or something. Selected, of course, as a leg break bowler.
Yes, yes, yes. So, and you talk very fondly about your grandfather. I mean, I get the feeling that he was a tremendous enthusiast and conveyed his love of the game and love of life. And
I think so.
Enormously influential in the setting up of the MCC coaching scheme.
He was an enthusiast for all the good things in life. I mean, I think he enjoyed life, and I think that comes across in everything I've read about him. And he conveyed that enthusiasm for the good things in life, for the good values in life, throughout his time as a schoolmaster. He was fundamentally a schoolmaster. That was his profession. He started in 1912 at Winchester, and he remained there, apart from war service, until 1947, when he came out of his boarding house. He became a housemaster in 1927, would have retired in 42, but of course the war was on, so he stayed on as a housemaster. And one of the things we discovered later on in life was a collection of letters to him from his old people who had been in his house, who wrote to him through the war. And there are about 70 or 80 letters, and he kept them all, or he kept a considerable number, which we've handed on to the Winchester archives. And so many of them wrote to him with such fond memories of their time that he must have been a remarkable housemaster, very much so. And he had this enthusiasm. We loved fielding practice with him. I'm not sure I was a very good fielder, but I used to love catching and throwing with him. And his house was right the other side from the college cricket ground at Winchester, Newfield, which is a heavenly ground. And so we used to go there and field. He'd throw catches to us. And bowled us in the net, etc. And there's a picture in the book of me with 2 very old pads on the cricket bat, actually in the garden at Kingsmead. And Bob will remember Kingsmead. He stayed there, and a lovely house.
Well, it's a good moment to bring Bob in for the first time. Now, I assume, Bob, that your first connection with Harry Altham stems from your extraordinary progress as a schoolboy cricketer. I have my copy of Wisden 1954 here with the public school results for 1953. Ruthyn School, 21 matches. You're 17 years old at the time. Top of the batting averages, R.W. Barber, 1,012 runs. Top of the bowling averages, R.W. Barber, 108 wickets. I don't know if in the history of schoolboy cricket anybody else has ever done the double in a season for a school, but this must have drawn you to the attention of Harry Altham, presumably, didn't it, Bob?
Bob, you need to unmute yourself. You need to unmute. Or Nick needs to unmute Bob.
Unfortunately, I can't. Oh, here he is. Here he is.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Sorry, Stephen.
Yeah.
Right. Gremlins. I'd known him before that, Stephen. I played for the Welsh Schoolboys in 1951 against the English schoolboys, and they selected a group of us to go to the National Physical Recreation Centre at Lilleshall in 52. And it was there that I first came across Harry Altham. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him Harry now. It was always embarrassing as a boy to know how to call him. I always used to address him in letters as HSA, but I can call him, I think I can call him Harry now.
You'd be delighted. You'd be very pleased.
Tell us about your relationship with him over the years, because clearly he saw something in you from the start as a cricketer, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know. He was very, very kind to me. I mean, I from the time that I met him, for whatever reason, I corresponded with him regularly, and he corresponded with me regularly. I mean, I would say with that every 2 or 3 weeks, I would think. You know, he'd ask me what I was up to, and I'd tell him whether it was the cricket season or out. I think I make reference in the introduction, and I dug out of intrigue from my bookcase behind me here, which
That's lovely.
which is the first thing that he sent me was the collected poems of A.E. Houseman, because I think as a scientist he thought I was ignorant, which I probably was. And then he followed up with Clochmel and Clochmel Babylon, which so he was obviously trying to broaden me a bit. He was wonderfully encouraging, and whenever, you know, when I developed later and I was then playing county cricket, which I suppose I was from 54, and I would say, Robin, that Colin Cowdrey was a very good batsman in 54, because he was at Oxford and I bowled at him for Lancashire.
Right.
Anyhow, I used to, whenever I went to play against Hampshire, I always stayed with Harry Altham at Kingsmead, and he became a sort of very, very kind uncle to me. And just to echo what you said before this meeting, if you give me half a minute, I'll read. I thought, well, let me just think of how I remember Harry. And I wrote down a significant intellect with the common touch, a head slightly disproportionately large on a small body, a dominant and enlarged forehead, a deep love of life and especially of the game of cricket, a love of recreation, that is recreation, a breadth of view, a recognition of differing opinions, a wish to blend all together for the common good, a great enthusiasm for life and living. And I finished up by saying, and handwriting that was even worse than mine.
Well, Bob, that is absolutely lovely. You couldn't better it. The handwriting, you're absolutely right. You're spot on. It remains incredibly difficult to read. My mother was the expert at deciphering it. And there's the famous, which I have in the book, the comment from George Littleton at Eton, who said he knew he'd been asked to dinner, but the only thing was he wasn't quite certain what day it was. He knew it wasn't Sunday. That was the only thing he could decipher.
I would add over his writing, just to finish that one, that even Hubert Doggett, he produced a book which name escapes me as I'm talking on him, and he came once to Warwickshire to an old players do, and I was sitting by him and I said, you know, Hubert, you've actually mistranslated one of his letters, which you show in the book. And I told him what it was.
The book was called The Heart of Cricket.
That's right. Thank you.
Which is a lovely book. And yeah. I've plagiarized parts of it from what I've written. And shamelessly, I'm quite happy to say that.
Well, you I mean, he wrote, your grandfather wrote a history of cricket, a seminal work, which was later expanded in conjunction with Jim Swanton. And you quote in the book a paragraph in which he writes of Bradman, whom we're going to get onto in a minute. And I'll just read you this. It's beautiful writing. In the many pictures that I have stored in my mind from the burnt out Junes of 40 years, there is none more dramatic or compelling than that of Bradman's small, serenely moving figure in its big peaked green cap, coming out of the pavilion shadows into the sunshine with the concentration, ardor, and apprehension of surrounding thousands centered upon him, and the destiny of a test match in his hands. Now that is good writing. And he was a classicist, wasn't he?
He was, yes. It is a marvelous passage, that. And funny enough, I enjoyed the almost the sentence before that, where he talks about having been comprehensively bowled by Blythe. It is a lovely, it's also very good to the previous paragraphs where he is analysing Don Bradman, and I think as well as any, and he says he may not have had the mastery on all wickets that Jack Hobbs had, or the sheer grace of Victor Trumper, but he says he was the master of his calling. Yeah, I went back and reread much of the book. It is marvelous. I think Roland Bowen is right in his criticism of it, in saying it's like those histories of England, which tell you a lot about the kings, a certain amount about the barons, a little bit about Parliament, but not very much about England. And I think that is probably right. It tells you about a certain amount of cricket. It tells you about test cricket. It tells you about public school cricket and university cricket, but not a lot about the development of cricket. And to that extent, Bowen is right in his criticism of it. But it's beautifully written, absolutely.
Before we move on to the content of the book, just one further thing to say about your grandfather is that he was the pioneer of the MCC coaching scheme and the author of parts of the first MCC coaching book, wasn't he?
He was. He and Gubby Allen, I think it was Gubby Allen who asked at a MCC committee meeting after the war, 46, 47, what has the MCC ever done for the youth of this country? And it was a very profound question. And out of that came the MCC inquiry into youth cricket and the MCC Youth Cricket Association, etc., etc. And Harry and Gubby wrote the MCC coaching book together. Gubby on the technical side and Harry the writing bit. And everybody who came into Harry's study, the den as it was called, was asked to pick up a cricket bat that was in the corner of the room. Bob was probably asked to do this, I suspect. I was as a child, as a youngster. And how you picked it up was examined and noted down, and how you held the bat. And certainly the section on captaincy in that book, I think, still holds up today as how to captain a side. I haven't got the latest edition of the MCC coaching book, so I don't know if it's still there. I suspect it's been rewritten reasonably enough.
Well, here's a sentence from it. He must be this is about the captain, of course. He must be an optimist and inspire optimism in his side. He must show confidence in them in order that they may feel confidence in him. By personality and example, he can set and keep his team alight. Enthusiasm is everything. It may be for a bowler when things are going wrong with him, for a fielder as Mr. Catch, or for a young batsman faced with a crisis or out of form.
It's pretty good. Yes, it still stands up, doesn't it? I do recall my father telling me that when he was at Cambridge, somebody in the side dropped a catch, and whoever it was said, don't worry about it, you'll catch the next one. And the second catch went down, and there was apparently a silence, don't worry, catch the next one. If you drop that, you won't be playing for us again.
Oh dear, yes. Well, your father had a.
It's probably.
Your father had a.
Sorry,
I noticed. Your father got a couple of centuries himself, didn't he?
He got 100 against.
One I noticed against Yorkshire with Verity and Bowes playing.
And when the plaque to my grandfather went to Harry was unveiled at Lord's, I think I was at Sandhurst at the time, and I was allowed out for the day to come up to it. And amongst those present was Brian Sellers, who had captained the Yorkshire side in that match. And Brian Sellers, I can remember this vividly, a hand on my shoulder, this big man saying, "Young man, your father was a very good batsman, good enough to get 100 against Yorkshire." And I have to say, my whole body swelled with pride. Dad never, ever talked about it. Indeed, he talked about, after that, he then got 100 against Leicestershire. And the next weekend, he was playing for the Cambridge Crusaders at Oundle, the school. And he was announced going out to bat at number 3, just scored 100 against Yorkshire and Leicestershire, clapped all the way to the wicket. He took a first baller, walked back, and he always told the story. I heard him 4 or 5 times say it was the best thing that could have happened to him. Getting a first baller like that brought him down to earth. And I've told the story frequently to boys who've just got out for naught. And he said it was a very good leveller, and it was very good for him. So he was a good player. Yes, Dad was, yes.